And I think that's kind of unlocked a whole lot of bullishness. I kind of see it as like Chainlink's been throwing these timber logs in a pile for years, and they just struck the match and threw it on the pile. And then like now we're seeing the fire really growing.
So I think I want to just give you the chance to clear the air here. What is the purpose of the Link Reserve? How does it work?
Is there any math as far as like how much revenue Chainlink is generating? How much would you expect to go into this reserve on a recurring basis?
Welcome back to the Rollup. We are your hosts. I'm Andy.
I'm Robbie, and this is your home to learn from the biggest guests, the brightest minds at the tip of innovation.
Our goal is to help spread the collective knowledge of everyone in our community.
We are breaking crypto out of its echo chamber and taking it to the real world.
Let's talk all things Chainlink. We had Zach on, I don't know, maybe like 3 or 4 months ago, Zach. So good to have you back. It seems like a lot has changed, but also probably a lot has stayed the same. So good to see you. All right, we're going to talk Link Reserve. We're going to talk Swift, their upcoming conference. We're going to talk the just latest in the institutional race. But I got to start. XRP Army versus Chainlink Marines. Zach, I've been putting out these tweets that have been saying that this is a battle, that Link's going to flip XRP. They've been going viral. You've been fired up on them. Maybe give us your side of the story, man. How did this beef start? It's been going on for years. You're talking about NDAs that these guys have been, hush-hushing, breadcrumbs, trying to put together the best rumors possible on the XRP Army side. But you seem to be, very sure that Chainlink is the one that is actually kind of making this happen. How did this start? Give us the story here and give us your side of the story.
Yeah, I mean, this debate goes back to at least from what I remember, 2019, so like kind of early days when I really got into crypto Twitter. But what it comes down to ultimately is just who is the best position to benefit from the institutional adoption of blockchains. For at least, since Ripple was a thing, that was always XRP's narrative. That, XRP would be the one to benefit. They're the ones working with the banks. There's all these NDAs. It's all hidden behind the scenes. But when it happens, you better be ready. It's going to happen. I've been hearing that like stories along those lines for at least 7 years. Personally, that like the banks are right around the corner, they're just about to adopt it, and like that whole time, these past 7 years, Chainlink has actually been working with institutions, and not in like there's a PDF from 10 years ago that mentions Chainlink, or it's all NDA, so I can't talk about it. But it's like Swift comes out and says, hey, we're using Chainlink for this. JP Morgan comes out and says, hey, we're using Chainlink for this, and UBS and SBI and like all these entities have said very publicly about like how they're using the Chainlink tech stack. And then at the same time, I see like the overall narrative, specifically with like kind of normie investors, is still like, XRP is going to be the winner. So to me, there's this huge disconnect between what the narrative has been for like 10 years, which is like, XRP is going to win all the banks, to what I actually see in reality, which is that XRP's kind of core product just has not seen meaningful traction with institutions. Whereas what I see with Chainlink is the exact opposite. I see a meaningful growing acceleration in usage. So it's just these kind of massive disconnect. And then, along the way, you have these fun debates about people thinking XRP is cheaper than Link because the price is lower, because they don't understand market cap, and all those fun Twitter debates. But ultimately, it just comes down to like, if institutions come on chain, which is exactly what we're seeing now, like it's pretty evident, who's going to benefit. And I think Chainlink's just the clear winner in that regard.
Introducing Extended exclusively on Starknet, a next-gen perp trading platform live today. With 50+ trading pairs from crypto to TradFi, you get the best experience on-chain today. Deposit in the community vault for attractive returns, EMV compatible, and engage in unified margin, spot trading, lending, and perps trading. Exclusively live at extended.app on Starknet today.
To be fair, the lawsuit against XRP must have slowed them down significantly and probably stopped them in their tracks, right? So do you think that, they're way behind now? A lot of these other, Chainlink was able to go and acquire all of these relationships. Do they have any sort of momentum now that lawsuit has been put to rest? Are you starting to see more signs of life? They're still light years behind some of the relationships that you guys have gotten, but are you thinking about them as a competitor? How do you see similar projects in the space, other oracles, other teams like this?
Yeah, so I wouldn't discount that like the lawsuit it didn't help them at all. I'll say at this point, they can no longer use that as a shield or an excuse for whether or not used.
Right.
But the U.S. regulators during the previous administration went against a lot of projects. They went hard against Ethereum, and Ethereum has come out even stronger. Like, they were growing in adoption during that time. So I can't say you can't really pin it on that reason alone, in my opinion. But like, from a technology perspective, Chainlink and XRP are two very different things. Like, XRP is a blockchain. They're about cross-border payments and this XRP bridge currency. Chainlink is much more about connectivity. What do tokenized assets need? What do smart contract applications need? They need data, and they need cross-chain and privacy and compliance and all these services that Chainlink provides. So really, from like a technical perspective, they're actually very complementary. Ripple uses Chainlink's data feeds for their stablecoin, their RLUSD stablecoin. That's why it's listed on Aave. It's because they have a Chainlink price feed. So like, from a technical perspective, they are complementary in that regard. But in my mind, when I think about how the landscape's going to evolve, is that there's going to be thousands of blockchains, and there's going to be even more tokenized assets and digital assets that institutions want to trade. In order for the XRP thesis to really play out as they think it will, institutions either need to adopt the XRP ledger as their blockchain, that's a pretty big bet that they're not going to go with any other blockchain or use their own ledger, or they're going to use XRP as like this bridge asset in their digital asset transactions, which I personally just have not seen that traction take off. Whereas when I look at Chainlink, the thesis I see is more, are institutions going to adopt blockchains? If yes, they're going to need Chainlink services. It does not matter if it's Ethereum or Solana or Connexus by JP Morgan, some permission chain. They're going to need data, cross-chain compliance, connection to Swift, all this. And regardless of what asset they want to use in those transactions, whether it's stable coins or CBDCs or tokenized funds or like Bitcoin or something, you're still going to need Chainlink services. If you want a lending market, you need to price the collateral. If you want perps, you need to be able to price those trades. Like, no matter what kind of asset or blockchain that's being used in an institutional context, you're still going to need Chainlink, whereas XRP is a much more specific bet that they're going to adopt their tech stack and their ledger and their asset, which I just find that to be personally unlikely and just much more riskier of a play. So when I look at like other players in the space, like, there's specific entities and they do price feeds, and there's entities and they do cross-chain or they do compliance. They typically do one of those things. Chainlink's the only one that I've seen that is doing all of these different verticals all within one platform. So I don't see any one-for-one competitor to Chainlink. Basically anything in the space can work with Chainlink, which is why there's thousands of integrations and users of Chainlink. But I assume at some point there'll be a competitor in the same way that Google and Microsoft compete, because they both have this giant tech platform that spans the entire Web 2. We'll see something like that in Web 3.
Yeah. I guess the last thing on this kind of topic is, clearly XRP and ADA, Cardano, have done something right with the way that they've built this fervorous community of people who, I mean, as politely as possible, know so little about how crypto actually works, yet are so vocally loud and excited about the fact that these specific companies or projects are the future of the entire space. Whereas it seems like Chainlink maybe has really attracted a strong, core marine community with regards to these like kind of crypto hardcore believers from Reddit, from 4chan, early adopters, but maybe like struggle to have a mainstream normie retail like message. Like, do you think that there's something that, like, are you guys working on something that is appealing? Like basically what I'm getting at is, there's a very left curve, like, oh, like XRP is going to be used by the banks, bullish. Like, and for some reason that has perforated and proliferated so much of that kind of population. But it seems like Chainlink maybe hasn't gotten that population so excited about Chainlink. Is there a reason why? Is there something that you guys have thought about from your messaging, or does that really just not even matter? And like, what actually matters is the people that you guys are working with and trying to actually get those people involved.
I think you're spot on in the perspective that Ripple, Cardano, and a few other coins have just perfected this retail or normie persona to retail investor. Like, that pipeline, your Uber driver, your barber,
It's just
or
insane.
whoever,
Yeah.
always going to talk about XRP first. Like, I have to give them credit on that whatever they did, if they did anything, it worked very well. I would say the core difference is that XRP's had the thesis of banks plus blockchains for 10 years. So they've been very consistent on that story, and they've just existed for a long time. And what I've kind of seen looking at, where do normies kind of get their information? Well, they get it from Facebook and they get it from TikTok and these places. And so when I look at it, I just see the most insane misinformation and just grand conspiracies about, BlackRock's going to buy 7 trillion of XRP, or, all these BISs secretly adopting XRP in their private ledger. I'm not saying everyone in the community, believes that or anything, but I just see that so commonly across the place. And that I think the Chainlink community has always taken kind of a no bullshit approach, where like they are not uncomfortable grilling the team if they think something's not correct. Like they will do that. And I think a lot of other communities don't have that energy. They'll just eat up whatever story that they're served on a platter by the social media algorithm. So I think there's kind of just, at least from the roots of the community, they just took 2 very different paths. But I will say there's been a lot of work of kind of simplifying what the Chainlink message is over time. And it's a difficult task because Chainlink just does so much. You have a data story, but you also have a cross-chain story. You have an institutional bank story, and you have this compliance story and this privacy story. Like, how do you create one story that kind of wraps everything up together? I don't think there's like going to be one perfect answer for that, but I think as more and more institutions like start using Chainlink, and the economics continue to improve, the story kind of creates itself within the community. I found that the best narratives and the best stories don't come from teams; they come from the community themselves, because they're able to find what's sticking. These memes propagate over time, and then the team can kind of lean on those stories. So I've seen that play out a little bit in Chainlink as well. And I think in general, as Chainlink goes down more of this unified platform approach, then you could just say, oh, it's a decentralized AWS. Like it's a developer platform. You go build applications there. And as more as the building blocks are put there, then that's more intuitive. But yeah, it's also a question of like, who's your audience? Is your audience retail investors, or is your audience the banks and Web3 developers? Because those are going to be 2 very different stories. You got to talk to both, but there's some projects that only talk to retail, and they don't really have much of a developer community as a result. And I think that's short-sighted of them.
Yeah. You pretty clearly articulated Chainlink's audience, right? And there's quite a few of them. Telling a unified story may be difficult, but you've identified Swift, MasterCard, JP Morgan, UBS, Bank of New York Mellon, Citi, Franklin Templeton, Fidelity. Like there's all of these names, and that's according to your tweet that you posted a few days ago. These are all using Chainlink, the global financial system is adopting Link. That's just to name a few. And so, these institutions are part of Chainlink's audience. You're talking to them, or the Chainlink team is talking to them. Other teams are targeting retail or normies, and you're talking to the banks. What is it that when you tell them, it makes them want to work with you? Like, what is it that you're saying in these conversations? When they hear it, they're like, okay, yes, we'd like to adopt Link. We're going to choose you as an institutional partner, whether it's blockchain services or it's data services. You're going into these conversations. You guys are saying things, and they like what they're hearing. What is it that you're saying?
Yeah, so I'm not in those conversations personally, but I've talked to the people who talk with those clients, and really just comes down to like, are you solving their core requirements? Because there's a lot of projects, a lot of crypto projects in general are looking for a problem to solve. They've come up with a great technology, and now they're just trying to figure out like who wants to use this thing and for what use case. So for Chainlink, it's really the reverse. It's talking to the client, going, okay, you want to do a tokenized fund. What do you need to make that possible? Oh, you need net asset value data. Okay, well, let's go build that solution for that. Oh, you need the ability to bridge your token from your private ledger to Ethereum or something. Okay, well, let's use CCIP for that. So it's very like problem solution oriented, where I think a lot of projects and a lot of companies in the space, they just either they don't have the connections to get the user requirements, or they just are so honed in on building really cool, interesting tech that they don't really stop to think about, okay, does this actually meet the institutional requirements? Because there's a lot of products in crypto that really don't just yet. So once you have those solutions, what Chainlink's been moving more and more towards is, okay, how can you use the Chainlink platform, the tech stack, in a self-serve manner? Because historically it's been, okay, Chainlink Labs is going to go build something for you, but that takes time and you have to deal with the team. As the platform is more self-serve, an institution go, okay, I just saw that JP Morgan's using Chainlink for cross-chain settlement. I want to do that. And if they can come to the Chainlink platform and just use it in the same way they use AWS, they just plug the things together. They don't actually ever have to deal with the team or talk to the team if they don't want to. They certainly can. There's get support and 24/7 on-call support and all that. But I think that's kind of the goal: is how can you actually solve the problems that they have with real products, and how can you reduce the friction by enabling them to not even have to talk to a human and just go out and build things? Because institutions are very similar in Web3 devs in that regard, where they just want to build stuff. They want to solve problems. They want to get users. They want to generate revenue. Like at the end of the day, the goals of TradFi are not really that different than crypto in terms of building apps and getting users and making money. It's just, they are more regulated and they're in a different use case vertical. But that's kind of always the way that I've seen Chainlink approach things. And in general, like, from like a marketing perspective, there'll be certain projects that they'll talk about the token price, and they'll go on TV with a T-shirt of their ticker logo on it and talk about how well the coin's going to do. Like, I cannot personally ever see Sergey doing anything like that. That's not the way.
He'll be wearing a flannel, dude.
Oh, or a suit. He's wearing a suit sometimes.
Yeah, or a suit. Exactly.
Well,
Zach, so let's talk about that then. The Link Reserve now is coming out, and I've been kind of writing about this in the last couple of months. Like, guys, it's not 2020 anymore. Like, there are so many crypto tokens now with so many different narratives and ideas that, like, you need to give somebody a damn good reason to buy your token. Like, it is no longer like, oh, like, we're all just going to go up and it's going to be great and we're all going to go down. It's like, sure, maybe we get some period of, like, whatever, alt season or altcoin outperformance, but, like, really there are now, and I think Hyperliquid as well as the new Trump administration both kind of push this agenda like further than any previous event, where one, you can redirect value back to token holders with the administration, less risk, less regulatory scrutiny. And then two, Hyperliquid came out and said, like, look, guys, we're just going to take all of our revenue and just buy that token back. And if you're not going to do something similar, then why would I buy your token? I'm just going to buy Hype. And so maybe there's other factors, but when it comes to my mind, I get to the point of where we're at now, which is like, give me a damn good reason to buy your asset and invest. Otherwise, I'm just providing exit liquidity for insiders. I think that's a lot of like the mindset people have. Now with Chainlink, you guys have rolled out this Link Reserve. There's been all sorts of just commentary about it. So I think I want to just give you the chance to clear the air here. What is the purpose of the Link Reserve? How does it work? Who is in charge? And what does this actually look like from a practical, like, protocol, mechanical, like, engineering perspective, in terms of how Chainlink ends up, getting linked to buy and hold in the reserve? Just kind of clear the air here. There's a lot of misinformation going around.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So the Chainlink Reserve, which was announced a few weeks ago, is a strategic on-chain reserve of Link tokens that is funded by both on-chain revenue generated by the usage of Chainlink services, as well as off-chain revenue generated via these enterprise deals and the integration of Chainlink on various blockchains. So the reserve itself is technically an extension of something that was released earlier this year called payment abstraction, which is infrastructure that Chainlink created to reduce payment friction. What that enables is that a user can come to the Chainlink platform and pay in their preferred form of payment for fees, the Chainlink service fees. So you can come in and you can pay with crypto native assets like ETH and USDC or other crypto assets, and you can come and you can pay in off-chain fiat, so like a bank wire transfer. And what payment abstraction does is it takes those assets on chain, if they're not already, converts them into Link using a decentralized exchange, which initially is Uniswap, and then it transfers those assets to those destinations, of one of which is now the reserve. And the reserve is really designed for the long term. So this is like a many year development. This is not like a short-term scheme. And it's really designed to support the network's long-term sustainability. So the Link token is a cap supply token, 1 billion coins. Eventually all will be circulating in the market. But there's still the need to be able to grow and expand the network and create useful services and grow revenue. And having a strategic financial reserve of assets to deploy is very valuable if you want to keep growing your project, even once everything's circulating. So now that Chainlink is revenue generating, Chainlink noted that Chainlink has generated hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue historically. Now it's in a position where it can start deploying that historical revenue into the Link token and store this into this strategic reserve where it's not going to be touched for multiple years, that they confirmed. So it's really just about driving long-term growth and sustainability, as well as answering the question of, Chainlink is working with Swift or JP Morgan or some bank, some entity, and they're paying for Chainlink services in dollars off-chain because for whatever legal or business reasons, they can't pay with cryptocurrency. There's plenty of businesses like that. Should Chainlink say, like, no, you can't pay us in that, we're not going to take your money? Like, of course not. They're going to take the money and then put it back into the system. So by putting that revenue on-chain and converting it to Link, it's directly connecting this huge pot of enterprise revenue that Chainlink is generating and continuing to grow, and directly connects that back to the token which then fuels the system's long-term growth and sustainability. So it's really creating a unification between all these different sources of revenue, which, as far as I'm aware, and I'm happy to be corrected, like this is the first time that a project has brought off-chain enterprise revenue on-chain and converted it and put it back into its own native token. Like there's Hyperliquid with their buyback system, which was fantastic to see, but it's all on-chain. So like you can see all the flows. But when you're signing a legal contract with a bank because they need someone to sign a contract with, because that's how they do business deals, then you have to be able to connect that back to the token. And I think that this Chainlink Reserve, which is effectively a buyback program, is a very clear answer of how does that revenue connect back to the token to support the network sustainability and grow the network economically. So it's kind of a unification. And what I've seen is that people have been very bullish on Chainlink from like a technology perspective and an adoption perspective, but they never saw the connection of how that ties back to the Link token. And I think with the reserve, it provides a very clear answer of how you as a token holder are contributing to the system and benefit in addition to staking. And I think that's kind of unlocked a whole lot of bullishness. I kind of see it as like Chainlink's been throwing these timber logs in a pile for years, and they just struck the match and threw it on the pile. And then like now we're seeing the fire really growing. And I think until that match was struck, people just couldn't make the connection.
Well, because everyone knew that you guys were like a good project, right? Everyone knew that you guys had these enterprise deals and that it's expensive to use Chainlink. Like word on the street is that Chainlink's expensive. Like fuck, like we should use a different Oracle provider, right? Or stuff like this. But now you can actually take that revenue and bring it directly on chain and use it to be buying Link, which it kind of completes the arc for those who have believed for a long time.
So Zach, intuition says that this is a one-way street. Like what you're saying here is that there's going to be deals that are made. Teams are going to pay with dollars off-chain, fiat into bank accounts. That money is going to be moved on-chain. It's going to be used to buy Link. Link is a fixed supply asset. There's a finite supply, and we're just going to store this Link away. We're just going to put it into the reserve, and we're not going to touch it for years. I mean, like, maybe this is public info, maybe it's not. Like, is there any math as far as like how much revenue Chainlink is generating? How much would you expect to go into this reserve on a recurring basis? And then, like, my intuition says this is going to fill up relatively quickly. Like, Link is just going to get sucked out of the market and stored into this reserve. And then what, you know?
So I would note that the reserve is one destination where revenue goes. There's also nodes in the network need to be able to be paid because they need to keep the lights running. And there's also staking, which is a third component that's a portion of revenue we'll be going to as well. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, what I see the initial reserve announcement, they've put in $1 million a week for the past 2 weeks. So it's just begun. So based on market price, I think it's about 2.4 million currently. I think that creating the reserve was really just a confirmation that, hey, the token is actually a core part of the system, that when Chainlink gets adopted in the future and more and more banks and institutions come on chain, you can understand how that connects back to the Link token. Because there's a lot of projects in the space where they generate revenue and then they just keep it for themselves. And then they kind of just let the token go by the wayside and pretend like it doesn't exist, or give little cherries or something. Like it's a very common dynamic where you have this projects who issue equity and tokens, and then they have preferential treatment to the equity holders over the token holders. Like, it's a very real dynamic in this space. And I think what Chainlink is basically saying is like, hey, there's none of those games here. The token is the core economic asset of this network. So I think really the long-term potential is, when institutions come on chain, they start tokenizing assets, because we're really have just begun. Like, we see some T-bills, see some private credit coming on chain, but it's pretty minuscule. And then we have the SEC chairman coming out saying, hey, tokenize everything. We're going to bring the whole on the stock market on chain. And they have Larry Fink saying the same thing. And you have all these guys, top level, either government or institutional leadership, saying tokenization is the way forward. And RWA TVL is like a few billion currently. So for me, the whole market has really just begun. So like, projecting is very difficult to tell at this stage, because we just have seen such a small segment actually come in at this stage. And Chainlink is, the platforms continue to grow as well. Like, a big source of monetization is deploying Chainlink services on blockchains. But in the future, that may switch more towards enterprise deals with institutions. They're deploying a large fund and they need all these services. So it's like, there's going to be a lot of moving pieces. But personally, I'm very, very bullish on the ability of Chainlink to generate revenue.
Yeah,
revenue.
I think that's the conclusion to draw, is that we listed off several financial institutions that are using Chainlink or adopting Chainlink one way or another. That's the demand side, and what you're talking about, all this reserve filling up, is I think the only conclusion to draw is that there's this supply side crisis at works.
You sound so bullish, man.
I just don't know how
you sound like
can
an
just
Ethereum
put
triple
all of
point
this
asset,
away.
dude.
I'm curious to see, like, at the other end of this, once the supply starts to get sucked out of the open market, like, then what? What is the plan with all of this link in this reserve? Once it starts to fill up, I'm just curious.
I mean, ultimately, the long-term goal is that the reserve is able to grow faster than its withdrawn fund. Like, if Chainlink is really successful, like, they're going to want to be able to tap into it and deploy new Oracle networks and be able to use those resources. But if more revenue comes in than you're tapping from, I mean, that's just, like you said, a massive supply sink. So I think that is like the best case scenario, where revenue and adoption just goes exponential, and we just see this growing black hole of Link being stored in this reserve that just doesn't need to be tapped, because it's better suited to sit in the reserve than be deployed.
Yeah. Zach, let's shift gears into the upcoming Swift conference. I think it's about a month and a half out. What is the plan for Chainlink there? Who's going? What is the expectations? Is there anything that you can share? Is there any expected announcements, things that you've heard? What is the usual kind of setup for the Swift conference that Chainlink kind of participates in?
Yeah, I can't speak to specifics to this year's, but historically what we've seen, and just so people know, Sibos is Swift's annual financial conference. They've been doing that for many years. Sergey was there like in 2016, and then now for the past, I want to say 3 years, Chainlink has been there every single Sibos, giving a talk, connecting with institutions, having a booth. Like, it's a good area to connect with a lot of institutions and drop news related to institutions, because you'll get the most amount of attention from that relevant audience. So I would probably expect Sergey to give a talk, maybe something about Swift. I don't want to like speculate. I can't really say, to be honest, what's going to happen at Sibos this year. But historically, because Swift and Chainlink have been working together for so many years, and they've entered pre-production on the ability for Swift member banks to connect to blockchains through Chainlink architecture. That's what they've been working on for a few years. They're very, very tight partners. So I can't say specifically what's going to be announced this year. I don't know. But usually that's always really good connections for Chainlink to make there, and kind of make a big splash with the institutions all being in one place at one time.
Yeah. And a little plug for SmartCon as well, coming up in November. Will you be there, Zach?
Yes, I will be there. It'll be in New York. Everyone listening should come. It should be a fun time. Sergey, of course, will be there. And every year there's always good announcements at SmartCon. So either virtually, but in person, if you can make it, that'd be fantastic.
Very exciting.
Yeah, Rob, that's about all that I have. I think we're coming up on time. Anything else for Zach?
Zach, this has been great. I think I fully understand the thesis on both the protocol side as well as the token side. And you guys have been able to leverage these conferences. I guess my only other question is, what other conferences do you recommend? Like this one that you mentioned has a ton of opportunistic institutional connections at play. Is there any other ones that you've found successful when it comes to making some more of these institutional connections yourself or anyone else on the team, that you've heard?
Yeah, last year I would say Singapore FinTech Week was a good one. That's where we dropped news about how we're working with UBS, SBI, as well as Swift naturally, on tokenized funds, as well as the ability for tokenized funds, like the subscription and the redemptions to the fund, to be settled using traditional Swift fiat payments while the fund is actually tokenized on chain. So as an institution, I can buy and sell tokenized funds while using my traditional payment rail. So that was received very well at that conference. So like you have like this whole segment of like crypto conferences, and then you have like these institutional conferences. And I think like we're seeing a little bit of bleeding between the two, but then Chainlink is, as always, the bridge between those two different worlds. So towards the end of the year, we always see like a bunch of financial conferences pop up that good news usually drops.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
All right, Zach, thanks for your time, man. Best of luck in the XRP versus Link wars on Twitter. Enjoy the bullishness on the timeline. I'm sure it's fun, and we'll catch you soon. We'll see you at SmartCon probably.
Fantastic. Great talking to you guys.
You
Thanks,
too.
Zach.
Thanks, Zach.